for myself, I would like simply to welcome you all and express my excitement of having you here on this very special occasion. It is a very special moment in a long-awaited meeting, and I'm very grateful to our distinguished journalist Lilia Goleminova for hosting this event. And I hope you will very confidently engage in the conversation by asking questions. So without further ado, I give the floor to our host and our guest. Thank you so much.
Hello everybody. For me, it's a real privilege. I'm a journalist from the Bulgarian National Radio. And I remember when after music, I studied journalism. One of our teachers in Montreal told us that the journalist is someone who knows everything about nothing and nothing about everything. But now, when I was reading and preparing for this conversation, I started to understand what that meant. So I guess sometimes many years should pass in order to understand some words or some sentences in your life. And I'm very happy that we can talk with Rebeka Goldstийн, because what she does it with brilliance and eloquence. She writes novels, she writes philosophical arguments. She can be so warm about subjects that usually sound so distant. She has many awards, maybe just to mention the Guggenheim and the MacArthur Fellows and the National Humanitarian Medal and many others, but I think that the most important words are those that she could share with us now. So, as a journalist, I was very, thrilled to write how interested you were as a teenager in people and how different people might be and what kind of, thrill they gave you when instead of going to school, you went on the streets talking to people. Is that still so? And why was that so important for you?
Oh, thank you. What a wonderful question to begin. And thank you so much for taking this on and for this invitation. My husband and I have so enjoyed our short time here in Sofia. Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah. So why was I such a bad student? It's really...
That was not exactly the question, but okay.
So I came from a very insulated, isolated background, a very religious background, Jewish, but from a very religious family that was very patriarchal. Boys were the most important and girls not so very important. And I was sent to a high school that was followed this guideline. It was an all-girls school. They were basically preparing us to be wives and mothers, and we were expected to get married quite young. And it bored me. I mean, I just knew this was not what I wanted. I wanted knowledge. So I had to cut school so I could get knowledge. That was my working principle. And so I had a long commute into school, and sometimes I would drop in, but usually I would head to a library. I was trying to get myself one way or the other an education. I knew I wanted to go to college, and but I was also terrifically interested in other people. We were a very small group. We were a minority in a big country, and my family. And I knew that other people had very different beliefs, were living life in very different ways. And I just wanted to talk to them and find out what most mattered to them, what was the guiding rules of their life. I knew what was being told to me should be the guiding rule of my life. I was in search for other rules. I think that was also something that both was feeding my desire for knowledge, but knowledge of other people, what makes them click, what matters to them, what they want out of life. And so yeah, it's amazing to me that I didn't get into more trouble because I was very innocent, really, you're brought up that religiously, you're very innocent, and I would go to, it was in New York, in Manhattan, and it was, I would go to the Village, the Village is the most exciting part of New York. New York itself, I hope you all will visit someday. It is the most exciting place in the world, and the Village to me was the most exciting part. It was a time when there were a lot of hippies, there was a lot of artists on the street making music. We were taught to dress very modestly, everybody's wearing their little mini skirts, and we would have to wear skirts, covering our knees, and it was like a circus to me, it was wild and exciting and so many different types of people. And I would talk to anybody who would talk to me, and I was 15, 16, a lot of boys would come over and talk, and sometimes I would even, they say, you want to come home? Sure, I would love to see your home. I would go with them, and nothing ever bad happened to me. It's really amazing to me. It didn't cross my mind that anything, I knew nothing. I was really ignorant. And it stayed. The thought that this world is filled with such diversity of people is still so exciting to me. There's so many stories. Everybody has a story to tell. Like a journalist, right? You must also be excited by the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why I felt so related to what you said.
Yeah. So although I was interested in the most obscure and most abstruse fields of knowledge, basically math, physics, and then finally I discovered philosophy, very abstract, to me it was always knit together as you. Thank you very much. It's very gratifying to me to see that to me these two passions of mine were very knit together. The most abstract, the most obscure, the most seemingly far away from human experience. But no, there's always an element of human experience. There's always stories knit into it, and I wanted to do justice to that. When I finally discovered I was a writer, I mean, that wasn't in my scheme of things. I loved science very much, and my great ambition was to someday meet a scientist. I hope I can get to college so I can meet a scientist. I never thought I could study it and in a little way even contribute. So, yeah.
Where do you get knowledge now from?
Everything. There's always so much to learn about. Right now, my obsession, like so many other people's obsession, is AI. And I'm very surprised, as everybody is how well these large language models are working. That's already very, very surprising. And it raises a tremendous number of philosophical questions. Every advance in knowledge raises philosophical questions. And so, it's always up to people who claim to be philosophers to keep up with all advances, scientific, technological, because there are always philosophical questions lurking in the background, and sometimes the philosophical questions push the scientific advance. That happened very much in physics in my day, actually. That the questions that philosophers were asking about quantum mechanics and such actually pushed the research. So, yeah, everything is a source of philosophical questions. Everything is a source of everything's interesting.
How do you get along with the AI?
How do I?
Do you like each other?
Oh yeah, we have very interesting conversations. Yeah, I've only recently, because I was busy working on my last book, and I didn't really keep up so much with the conversation about AI. And then suddenly, every question I'm getting is about AI, and so I'm really plunging into it. And yeah, it's, but yes, I have very, very interesting conversations. I'm always going over to my husband. You can't believe what this conversation I just had, these philosophical conversations with AI. Yeah.
I also read another sentence you said about the success of a philosopher that rests in the ability to convince others. Yeah. So you have to be very convinced in yourself. Where did you get that strength?
Yeah, I don't know. I certainly was not raised to have it. I don't know how this happens. I think I have very strong philosophical intuitions. When I got to graduate school, it was at a time when a certain view was reigning in Western philosophy. For example, we weren't allowed really to talk about consciousness, that this was considered a meaningless term. I'm raised, I was philosophically trained to be what we call an analytic philosopher. Precision, try to be very clear, very precise, as scientifically knowledgeable as possible, rigorous arguments. And it was during the time when the whole notion of consciousness, this inner experience, an inner world, was thought to be non-rigorous, and I thought, well, they're wrong. Consciousness exists, I know. I experience it, and that there's nothing that I know better than that there is consciousness. We know it directly, and everything else we know about matter, we have to infer, and often infer on the basis of mathematical description. There are a lot of steps you have to get to a physical description. But consciousness, no, and so, but I, so I just have these very strong intuitions about physics too. While I was studying, most people did not think of physics as a description of reality, rather it was an instrument of prediction. I thought, no, that's not right. So I don't know. These views would come to me, very strong intuitions, and then of course I'd have to argue them. I tried to convince other people, but I think it's a good question. I don't know where I got this confidence, but just very strong intuitions about all sorts of questions. Ethics, I have very strong intuitions about ethics. And then, of course, I have to come up with the arguments to convince other people. I'm glad to say things have changed in philosophy. They've caught up with me. You could talk about consciousness. You can talk about physics being a description of reality and such things, yes.
As I read, you were not very happy in Принстън when you studied because of the few things, genderly mostly connected. So, as you said, they caught up later. Was it really difficult for you?
Yes, a little bit because of these intuitions that were out of fashion. I had actually the one person in the Princeton philosophy department who I ended up working with, my dissertation advisor, Thomas Nagel, was somebody, I don't know if he's known here. He wrote a very famous article called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" It actually it resurrected the notion of consciousness in analytic philosophy. We were able to talk about, because what consciousness means is that there's an inner world that you can say, I can say of you, there's something it's like to be you. You're experiencing things right now because you're conscious, nothing that it's like to be this bottle or this table, so I can do anything I want to it. I hope it's not conscious. But you see, it's very important, the notion of consciousness, and because it also, ethical implications, consequences can follow from something that we call conscious. So, anyway, but I had this one guy who, as soon as I read, "What is it like to be a bat?" Yes, okay, he's somebody I can work with. That was good. So that was good. That worked out. But yeah, it was hard to be a woman doing this kind of philosophy. And I was doing philosophy of science, and I was always the only woman in the room. And so, and people let you know. And also, you know, I'm tiny. I thought, oh, if only I was like 6 foot tall with a big voice, you know. But, you know, it was always a tiny, skinny thing, you know. And so, yes, often I noticed I would get closed out of the conversation. I noticed the first week when I was in graduate school, I went out to lunch with all the other guys. They were all guys. And at first they were talking about something I knew about. And so I was talking, I was part of the conversation, but there was this other guy, he didn't know about the subject, but he was included. Everybody looked at him, and then the conversation turned to something I knew nothing about. I even remember it was aesthetics. It was from philosophy of art. I knew nothing about it. And it was suddenly the circle just closed, you know, and I wasn't there anymore. And so I thought, okay, I get it. I just have to know about everything. And I'll do that. I will try to know about everything and keep talking and keep pushing, not be closed out of the conversation. Yeah, but I mean, it was tiring. It's tiring.
But you were brave.
Maybe. Maybe.
Now when you look back at yourself, what do you think? Were you brave?
I was determined. Yeah, I was determined. Yeah, I didn't take the privilege of a good education for granted. I didn't. Coming from where I came from, I couldn't take it for granted. I wanted to get as much as I possibly could out of it. My family thought I was crazy. I had to, I don't know, you know, I had to redeem myself, you know, and maybe, I don't know. These are, yeah.
So many interesting facts in your way into life and into philosophy. And I read that when your daughter decided to go into philosophy, your mother told her, please don't see what happened to your mother. But she went there. So you're a good example.
Yeah. In fact, my mother, she's long dead, so I can tell the story, but she offered my daughter a big bribe, $10,000. Don't study what your mother studied. So yeah, they were not, she was not so very proud of me. Yeah.
I guess she was in her heart, and that's very warm, the story you're telling about when they come to your cabinet and they saw the professor.
Oh, you saw that?
About your father?
Yeah, my father, yeah. So my father was born in Ukraine and from a very poor family, and came over right before World War II. And you know, they never quite understood. They knew I had graduated from college, that wasn't enough for me. That I was still studying, and you know, when I was very young, my mother would say, "No man is going to want to marry you. You know, you're too smart." And my father would sometimes say, "It's a shame that you have this brain that belongs to a boy." You know, this is so and all of this. I mean, it didn't discourage me. I just thought, oh, that's a strange thing to say. But my father, so they knew I went on, they knew I got my doctorate, they knew I was a professor, but I think my father had not quite processed it, had not quite taken it in. And because I was still just his little Rebecca. And he came one day to pick me up from my office, and it was at Columbia University in New York, and it was a big, nice corner office. Not a little cubicle. It had windows and everything, but it had a plaque saying Professor Rebeka Goldstийн. I think it was the first time my father really took it in that I was a professor. And he said, "It says professor." I said, "Yes, Dad." "Yes, I told you, I'm a professor." He's very old world, you know, And then on the way back in the car, he said, he was very quiet, he was very reticent, very quiet person, didn't express his feelings very much. And he said, you know, in Europe, a professor was thought of as a very high thing. And so I didn't, I also am very reticent. I didn't ask him, well, what do you mean by that? So then I was thinking, well, what does he mean by that? Does he mean that in Europe, unlike in America, a professor is a high thing because it can't be a very high thing because she's a professor? Or did he mean, oh, I'm proud of you. It must be a high thing. Maybe you're doing something here. But, and to this day, you know, I never asked him, I don't know, did he mean, oh, these Americans, what do they know? They made her a professor. Or did he mean, oh,
no, I don't think so.
I like to think the latter, yes. Yes.
It's sure that he was so proud of that, and your mother was in a different way, I guess.
You know what? I think maybe she wasn't. My mother, I think, it was very, very smart, but she never went to college. She was born during the Depression, and you know, came of age during the Depression. She had to go to work in a factory, and I know that she was a very smart woman, but she didn't have any opportunities at all, and I think she just blamed it on the fact that she was a woman, and women just don't have opportunities. And so in some sense, my pushing and going further made her doubt, you know, it's not just being a woman, that there was, it can be done. But of course it was in her day. It was just being a woman. You know, it was hard enough for me to be a woman in my day, so I think there was a kind of self-protective denial on her part, because she was, even, you know, when I got this award, and it's called the MacArthur Award, and it's popularly called the Genius Award, which is ridiculous, but it was a kind of I don't know, journalistic, I would say, thing to popularize this award, but you know, I remember when I would do something like forget to put the food away, my mother would say, "Oh, the genius, right?" So you know, I think there was something a little self-protective, or who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, but it's very interesting to note everything that happened before you became as you were now. But if we, because I'm interested in many moments of your life, but maybe it's good to talk about the mattering instinct.
Yeah,
because it's really a very, it's so interesting to read it. Okay, this is it. What was the genesis of, when did you begin to think about it and to put it into a book?
Oh, okay, so this book actually had its beginning in my first book, which was published in 1983. Can you imagine? This is ancient history. I don't know if you were born then.
Those 80s, yeah.
Yeah, those 80s. And it was, in fact, a novel. This was, again, a crazy thing I did, right? I was trained as a philosopher, as an analytic philosopher, also women in doing what women were not supposed to do, this technical kind of philosophy. So what do I do to show that I'm really a serious philosopher of science, a philosopher of mathematics? I write a novel, right? And it was a pretty sexy novel too, you know, and it was a bestseller. And it was, so it was as if I was saying to my colleagues, oh, don't take me seriously. But in fact, it turned out to be so interesting. If you're interested in how other people's minds work, what it's like to be other people, other subjectivities, what their experience is like, where do we go? We go to literature. And I love literature. I love novels. And I always read them in secret, because it wasn't math, it wasn't philosophy, it wasn't physics. You know, I considered it a little bit frivolous, but because it was so much fun. And then this idea for a novel came to me. A voice came to me that wasn't my voice. It was saying, the first I heard from this character, she said, I'm often asked what it's like to be married to a genius. And I was married to a very smart man, not my cousin husband, another very smart man, and a physicist, in fact. And we used to write papers together. And we were both very young, and I had never been asked this. And I thought, oh, this is a novel. This is the first line of a novel, so I have to write it. And it was so fascinating to enter into another way of looking at the world. So then I sold it to an editor, and his first question to me when we had our face-to-face meeting was, said, I don't completely understand your main character. She's very good-looking, she's very smart, she's very funny, she's very sexually desirable, she has many affairs, and but she's always so unhappy. She's always on the cusp of despair. Why? And I thought, yeah, he's right. And I could hear that in the first line of the novel. I'm often asked what it's like to be married to a genius. It sounds like she's not very happy with her own life. And so I thought about it. And then, I walked around for 3 weeks trying to figure out what was the source of her unhappiness. And it was, then I could hear her saying, it's because I don't feel like I matter in the way that most matters to me. And I thought this was really interesting, how important it was for our own happiness. It was like she was telling me something I didn't know. How important it is for our own sense of happiness with ourselves, with our lives, with our sense of flourishing, to feel as if we matter in the way that most matters to us. This connected me up with this obsession I always had in talking to as many people as I could. But what I was asking them basically was, what makes you, what gets you up in the morning? What keeps you going? What most matters to you? What do you want to accomplish in your life? What can go wrong in your life that makes you think that you're a failure? And I would get so many different answers about this. And that was the first germ of what became, so many years later, this book that I just published, now, in my, what is it, 2026, 1983, I published that first one. But all this time, I've been thinking about this, and a whole theory grew out of it, starting with physics. Everything for me always starts with physics, going to biology, psychology, philosophy, and ending with ethics. So these are, maybe it's my last book, because I finally figured out how it all fits together in a way that I've been trying to figure out my whole life, how it all comes together, what makes us click, why it manifests in us the same desire in so many different ways, how it breeds our deepest controversies and most irresolvable conflicts, because we care so much about what matters and we disagree so deeply about it, and so it really can drive us apart. So the subtitle says, and how our deepest longing drives us and divides us. And so, also it was during COVID that I thought about when the differences between us were becoming ever more heated and vicious and hostile and filled with anger, that I thought I should finally write about this. But it had developed into such a big theory that I worried about getting it into a book, because it seemed to explain so much.
I have a quote here from the beginning of the first chapter, that it's the missing piece of the puzzle of understanding ourselves, each other's in these troubled times. It's everything inside.
We're such an interesting species. That's what I discovered while I was playing hooky from high school, right? That we are, in the way that we're so alike, that we basically, that we have to justify ourselves to ourselves. That's what the mattering instinct is really about. that we really want to show ourselves that we're not wasting our lives, that we're not wasting our short time here, that this is something, as long as the safety features of life are in place, we're getting enough food and we have enough safety and security, that we don't have to worry about seeing another dawn. We start thinking about, well, and what am I living for? What is this struggle for survival for? And we come to such different conclusions. It could be religious. It could be in terms of achievement. It could be in terms of our social relationships. It could be in terms of trying to matter more than others. So many, power, dominance, influence. So many different answers that we churn up. And then we stake our lives on this, and we really care about it. And so it's hard for us to understand others who go about their lives so differently. And that's been ever since high school. This has been in the background, trying to understand this.
Did it give you peace when you wrote it in a way?
Yes, it did. It felt very good to finally tame it. I was skeptical of it because also my training is in analytic philosophy. We like small little problems, not grand metaphysical schemes, right? We like small problems that can be solved, most gratifyingly solved by analysis of language. It's called analytic philosophy. And this was a big theory, a new way of looking at us and what makes us click. And finally, always I wanted to get to ethics. What can we all accept in all of our differences, religious, secular, right politically, left politically, the power dominators, the socializers? What can we all accept are better or worse ways of living our lives? So that was very important to me to get to that place. And actually, I'm not totally finished with that. Actually, on the plane coming over here, I found some more consequences. So, other things I want to write about ethics.
And it has so many quotes and lines from so many things inside. As a musician, I saw quotes from composers and conductors. Their quotes from the past, from history. It's like, as you said, all the lines that have been in your life since your school years.
Yeah. And some of the people I knew personally, some of them I've only read about. I like very much reading biographies, and I was testing for these past 40 years this theory that was growing. Is it going to hold up? Am I going to find what we call counterexamples, falsifying examples that, and I still may, But I wanted to, then it became, I wanted to meet as many people, understand as many people as possible. I mean, for example, I really wanted to meet a racist. I think, and I read a lot about, white supremacy unfortunately is still present in the United States of America. And in fact, it's very much on the rise, and not very much, but somewhat on the rise. And I was going on Reddit and reading, these messages. Also the incels, the involuntary celibate young men who blame women and feel very strongly that they matter more than women, or when are women going to realize that and get back to doing their bidding? And the white supremacists feel like it also can be put in the language of mattering. They matter more by birth, than people of color, people that they call the mud people. And I'm reading all this, and I want to meet one, I want to talk. to them. I want to talk to them about mattering. So I tried to get in touch with various racists, white supremacists. Not so surprisingly, because they don't like Jews either. I have a very Jewish last name. I mean, I have a very Jewish first name, Rebeka Goldstийн. It's very Jewish. And so none of them wanted to talk to me, because the theory is that that these inferior people are being put in place. It's called the Great Replacement Theory, and it's gained some popularity in the United States. These inferior people are being put in positions of authority, like President Barack Obama, in fact, they always say President Barack Hussein Obama, to just rub it in, and President of the United States of America. And who is behind this? And it's to get rid of the superior people, the white people. Who's behind it? The Jews. They are, and it's their strategy to take over the world ultimately. So I didn't get any return phone calls or emails. No, but they didn't want. But then I did. This guy got in touch with me, and he's an ex-white supremacist, an ex-neo-Nazi. He was a real Nazi. He had a big swastika tattooed on the side of his neck, and skinhead was on his knuckles. It was spelled out so that when he would beat up people of color and Jews, they would know why. And so he was a bad dude, and he committed many crimes, and he was put into a maximum security prison at the age of 17. He was tried as an adult. He had done so many very bad things. And he called me back. I was like shaking like a leaf, to have this conversation with him. And then I flew out. He lived in Los Angeles, and I flew out to meet him. He's a good friend of mine now. He's, in fact, I won't tell you the whole story. It's such an amazing. I hope the book is translated into Bulgarian so you can read this story. It's an amazing story. As a novelist, I could not make up the story of this guy, but he understood exactly what I was talking about in talking about mattering. He grew up in the worst family situation. His mother was a drug addict. His father had been in the U.S. Navy and had been in the boxing team and used to use little Frank as his boxing bag, and terrible, and he felt terrible about himself. He felt like he didn't matter. Then he came in contact with these neo-Nazis. They said, and he told me, I remember his words verbatim, "Look into the mirror. What you will see is somebody who matters more than other people. You are a white, male, American, heterosexual. These others are stealing your mattering away from you." So it's this kind of zero-sum view of mattering, adversarial. There's only so much mattering to go around. When these lesser people rise, lesser people being people of color, women, immigrants now in the United States of America, as they are rising, they're taking away what's rightfully yours, and you have to take it back. And that, it was such an insight, and he's a very smart guy, and, we've had many interesting conversations, but it was all about mattering. So he's in the book, but everybody was one way or the other. Somehow the way they would try to convince themselves, it's yourself you're trying to convince, that you deserve all the attention that you have to give yourself to pursue your own life. It's not about the attention of others. It's not about mattering to others. It's really mattering to yourself, trying to justify your own mattering to yourself. That's the steep motivation that makes humans live so very differently from each other. I spent a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, I would like to spend much more time looking with the chimpanzees. And in many ways, there are a lot of behavior that we can see as very human. But they don't have to convince themselves that they're worthy of their attention to themselves. They don't have existential crises. They don't consider suicide, which is what happens to people who are convinced that they don't matter. In fact, the U.S. Suicide hotline is www.youmatter.gov, because people who suffer from severe depression, what they're lacking is feeling that they matter. And so it's a very deep longing in us, and we never know if we really succeed, but we have to sort of do the best we can in the face of uncertainty.
It's a new book, as you said. Have you met many people who read it? How is it going? Do you have a feedback?
Yeah.
And who is it for? Is it for for a wider circle, as was it for the body and mind?
Oh, always. I'm always, I stopped writing for philosophers. It bores me at this point. You go to write for a small audience who's just trained in a specialized language. What's the point? Philosophy is for all of us. Philosophy is, we are, the mattering instinct itself, this thing that I'm writing about, that we're trying to justify ourselves in our own eyes. This is a philosophical quest that we're on. What would justify ourselves? What really matters? This is a very deep philosophical issue, and so I think, the very thing that makes us human really makes us philosophical. Many people don't realize that they're thinking about philosophical questions, and that's my job, to tell them, yes, this is very serious. This is, some people like me are privileged enough so that we spend our whole lives thinking about this, and maybe we have something that will be helpful to tell you. But I don't see, what's the justification for my life of great privilege, that I've been paid to think about what I want to think about? That's an amazing privilege, right? So what do I give back by that? Well, I think it's a responsibility, So yeah, I only write for the general audience. Yes.
Yeah, we do hope that it's going to be translated in Bulgarian as well, for sure. And just to go back a bit to the time when you were a student, but now you're teaching for many years, what would you say to students nowadays who go into philosophy? Because again, in an interview of yours, I saw that some thoughts about ranking and how bad was it instead of the joy of thinking.
Yeah, that was one of the things about being a graduate student. You brought it back to me. I'm so far away from that maybe it's grown dim. But I couldn't wait to get to graduate school. That I would be able to think all the time, day and night, about what I wanted to think about and get better at it and have guidance. But I went to a very good program at the time. It was considered the best in the U.S. and they only accepted 10 people. And everything was about, are you good enough? How are we ranked? Who's going to get the job recommendation, for Harvard, and who's going to get it for, someplace you don't want to be, and so, and it drained all the joy from it, and that it was had become something competitive, and that I was supposed to be in competition with my fellow students, that I should be thought higher than them. I don't know, competition always makes me just want to curl up and die. It just takes all of the joy out of everything. And so, as still, to this day, as soon as something becomes competitive, I just want to find the nearest exit and flee. So, that, and I think now that had something to do with my writing a novel. I had just become an assistant professor, and I wrote about a graduate student in philosophy who was not a particularly successful graduate student. They liked me because I knew physics, and so that was okay.
So it's good to know physics.
Yeah, well, for that department, it was very good to know physics, and sometimes I would just say something when I was challenged philosophically. I would just very dishonestly say something from physics, and if it answered them, they didn't know the physics, so they thought I was answering it, but I was cheating. But but she was not like that, and so she was made to feel as if she didn't matter. She came to graduate school as I did, well, all enthusiastic, and was doing what was not in fashion. And so she sort of goes through a crisis. She goes through a crisis, and falls back on her other ways of feeling good about herself. Basically, seducing a bunch of men. She falls. That's what the mind-body problem meant there. The mind-body problem means something technical in philosophy, but I was making a little joke there about this. So, but I think that was a way of healing and getting back to my love of philosophy, was to write that novel, sort of put myself outside of that whole ranking thing and how silly it is. And by the time I finished the novel, I was healed. I loved philosophy again, and I also had gone through the fire of publishing something that my fellow philosophers thought almost put me outside of the field, and I didn't care. I didn't care anymore. So that was helpful too, yes.
And how do you deal now, and not now, but all these years when you were teaching with this, with your students?
Yeah, well, I just want them to love philosophy. And I teach philosophy in a way that hopefully, that they would love it. And now things have changed in the field. At least I can report in the United States. I meet many philosophers now who say they want to write for a popular audience, they want to be more public, and a lot of them telling me they would like to write novels. And so, which I is very healthy. I think it's very, very wonderful. And I attribute a lot of the change to there being more women in philosophy, that it has sort of been opened up a little bit in this way. So, yeah, I think there's been progress made, and every time some philosopher says, "Oh, I would like to write a novel," inside I'm smiling.
You've been there,
I'm very happy that one can say this now.
What's the most joyful thing nowadays in the world?
What's the most joyful?
Joyful thing for you?
Oh my God, to me the most joyful thing, and I'm experiencing this very much in writing the book, that I get to meet people from many different cultures. Somebody just was 2 days ago interviewing me from Estonia, and I think to myself, it was such different backgrounds. I was raised in such a isolated, insulated little world, and that we can understand each other. It makes me cry, really. That we can, if you dig deep down enough, to this, what I call the marrying instinct. We're so similar, and the things that have made us feel worse in our life, the worst moments, are often the things that, of course, when we lose loved ones, and these terrible things that happen, but also personally, when we've been made to feel as if we don't matter, when somebody treats us as if we don't matter, and it's so to me it's that same thing. It's the joy of meeting people who are raised so differently, who would probably look at my family, who even dress differently, the men wear black hats and everything, and think, oh, these are foreigners, these are so different. No, we're the same deep down, and all of us living with uncertainty. We don't know if we're living our lives the right way. We're honest with ourselves. I don't know, these kinds of heart-to-heart conversations are, to me, very, very meaningful. It is the deepest joy I get, besides for my loved ones. And he left, I had to say that.
Well, I have so many other things to ask, but maybe because it's so many people in the audience, maybe you want to ask something, or to add something, or to say something. I want to be your student. That's what I decided from this conversation.
Yeah, I would love it. Sometimes I feel actually that Well, we go to university, especially to study philosophy, too early, because, the more you live, the more you realize how these questions come up. And sometimes I will hear from students decades later, after they're old already, and they say, "Oh, I was just thinking about what you said, and I finally understand it," And that's what I want to do with my students, put in the germs of these, to plant it in, say it in as most powerful way possible, so it'll stick. And, I'm a big performer when I'm teaching, because the most important thing is to keep your students listening, and we all want to daydream and fantasize. And so, I do very much when I listen to lectures. So I try to be very lively, funny if I can be, but also moving and such, just to get it in there, plant it there. And then maybe it will germinate. Maybe it will take several decades and it will germinate. Things that I read when I was a student are just now unfurling and flowering, and I'm fully understanding them. So it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime of trying to understand and get everything to fit together. And the widest, what is the definition of a philosopher? The one I've always liked is to try to understand how things in the widest sense possible all fit together in the widest sense possible, which is why I feel it's very, very important for philosophers to go to every source of knowledge, to the sciences, to the arts, to the humanities as a whole, and just try to fit it together and always processing the new knowledge that comes in and trying to fit it together. So AI now, very, very important. And that's what it is. That's the task of being. Are you students of philosophy?
Some of
Yeah.
one soul.
Yeah.
Old enough to study philosophy.
Yeah.
So I guess you were saying so many things while you were answering the questions. So I guess that's why nobody's asking, because it's like such a colorful painting. Okay.
Actually, I'll took the opportunity because I just wanted to thank you for your talk and for the things that you have shared. And I was thinking, because the mattering is what actually we try to do to entire our lives, but it has different levels, and I believe that.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yes. Okay, should I use it or not? Okay, so it strikes me like something which is probably inevitable, but only if you have fulfilled every other basic requirement. So, is it something? Because you mentioned that in animals it's not a problem. They don't search for their place in the bigger picture for the universe. And what I know as a biologist is that some species actually can laugh.
Yeah.
Most mammal can.
Yeah.
But horses don't. So, but I'll give you an example, and I'll ask you then to commend it.
Yeah.
There is a story which goes. It was like the last year it was published about a cow. So cows can laugh, and this cow was raised as not as a productive animal, but as a pet. So she had enough time. And she actually started to use tools in order to scratch her back. So she started to use a tool designed by her owner, and it gave her a pleasure. So my point is, do you think that given such circumstances, like enough free time and enough food and enough let's say, conditions for life, is it the prerequisite of search for mattering?
Oh, beautiful. Okay, the two parts to my answer. So, you're exactly right, that there are certain preconditions that have to be in place in order for what I call the mattering instinct. It's not really, strictly speaking, an instinct. The first thing I have to do is correct, the publisher liked the name the mattering instinct. And the first thing I have to do is correct it in the book. It's not strictly speaking, and it's more like a spandrel, what a biologist would call a spandrel. But there have to be certain preconditions in place in order for it to emerge. And what is so interesting that we can actually see in human history when it emerged. And there's a period in history that we call the axial age. There was a German philosopher, Karl Jaspers, in the 20th century, German philosopher, who noticed something really interesting, which was that all of the religions that are now extant, as well as Western philosophy, all emerged during the same period, roughly 800 to 200 BCE. So, Confucianism, Taoism, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, the first Abrahamic religion, and there have been some further Abrahamic religions, but that approach of monotheism first emerged then, and Western philosophy. These are all value systems. They're all devoted to the question of what is it that makes a human life matter? And that's a question of values. The mattering instinct turns us into values-seeking creatures. That we want values. We want to know what mattering means is actually deserving of attention. So what we want to know is what is truly deserving of attention. Ultimately, we want to know whether we are deserving of all the attention that we have to give ourselves just to pursue our human lives. So that is such for me, it's a very dramatic, very persuasive argument that certain things have to be in place before this kind of value-seeking normative framework gets proposed, and those frameworks that were proposed had such a lasting resonance that one way or the other, we all can trace our value system back to one or the other of them. For me, I was born into one, the Abrahamic approach. I rejected it, and I can trace what I ended up on. I trace it back to to the Greeks, to the ancient Greeks. So this part of the world means a lot to me. So that is true. So the other thing is, we are a gregarious species, evolved from gregarious species. To be a gregarious species means that there are other members of the species who will matter a great deal to us, whether we deserve it or not. Just the mattering instinct has to do with trying to figure out what is deserving, what we ought to base our lives on, what kind of values we should base our lives on. But when it comes to the people who I say are in my life, by virtue of being gregarious, they are the people who will give me attention, who will consider me deserving of their attention, whether I deserve it or not. Who are these people? They're the people I call my friends, my loved ones, my colleagues, sometimes. They are, and other animals also have this, in this sense, that there are others who matter to them in this way, this mattering of others. And so, that they're, as you say, they are capable of love. But this is not what I mean by the mattering instinct. We use the same language, mattering. Mattering instinct, as I try to explain it, has to do not with our relations with others, it has to do with our relationship with ourselves, which sounds slightly paradoxical, right? Of course, we have a relationship with ourselves, the closest relationship. We're identical with ourselves. But to actually live a flourishing life, to live in peace with ourselves, we have to convince ourselves that we are deserving of all the attention that we actually have to give ourselves by the laws of nature that has shaped us. It sounds a little bit paradoxical. It is a little bit paradoxical. It's complicated. It's extremely complicated to be a human. And that is, and that's what makes us these value-seeking creatures that we are. And puts it at such deep odds with each other, so there's so much irony here. But it's one of my friends said that, who's listened to me talk too much about this, because it's my obsession. I talk to my friends about this all the time. He said he was going to make me a bunch of t-shirts to give out saying, it's hard to be human. And I think that's true. And I think that's one of the things I always think about, we're living in such polarized times. I'm living in the United States right now, and it's, oh my God, I just opened up the newspaper and I'm angry. I'm so angry and appalled by what's happening. And I have to sort of walk my way back. And why are people doing this? Why even, our leaders? Why, how is the mannering instinct playing out in them and in their followers? And why is this working? And, by the time I get through, it's almost like a Zen exercise I go through. I'm not as angry. I'm understanding more. And so that's a little more than you asked for, I think. But I had to add that. But yes, the thing that I really want to stress is that it's living with ourselves that is hard. And I haven't seen yet, I love animals, especially chimpanzees. Sometimes I think if I had to live my life over, I would go into the jungle and live with the chimpanzees. But I don't think they ever wake up and think, oh, look at all the attention I give myself, right? Am I really worthy? I don't think they suffer from that kind of, and everybody I've spoken to, these thoughts have crossed their minds, this notion of justification, of self-justification. They all, sometimes, for example, I've spoken, to a lot of religious people, some of them in my own family, and the way that we latch on to trying to justify ourselves can be so entrenched that we can't even imagine what it would be like not to have this. And so, one of my dearest relatives said to me, I just can't understand what gets you up in the morning? Why do you have any purpose in life? Because it's so entrenched in his way of thinking about his life. And I've actually met scientists, who have actually a physicist who said to me, I don't understand how people who don't study the fundamental laws of nature, what purpose can they have? Like, what gets them up in the morning? And this fashion designer, who said to me, she was a fashion editor of Vogue magazine, said people who don't care about how they dress, how they present themselves in the world, how can they live with themselves? What gets them up in the morning? What gets them down the stairs? So however you think about it, it becomes so entrenched. And many philosophers I know, if you don't think about the meaning of life, how can you have any meaning to your life? Why isn't everybody thinking about this? So, but I've never met, I don't think, and the man who studies chimpanzees, he was Jane Goodall's student, and he knows his chimps the way I know my children. I asked him, do they ever suffer an existential crisis where they weren't worried about the meaning of their lives? No. So, I don't know, is that satisfying? Okay.
Other questions? There's one over there.
How to incorporate this Japanese concept of ikigai and If you do, how do you differ in your book?
Yeah. So this too. I haven't specifically spoken to anybody with that philosophy. I would say that anybody who has a philosophy of life, is being motivated by the Mandarin instinct. But I have spoken to many Buddhists, and they seemed to me, I was very worried about them, that they would present a real challenge to this theory of, and I tried to generate it from the basic laws that have made us. So that's why there's all the science in the book, because I want to argue that we have a common human nature, and there are two deep longings. One is our people in our lives, the sense of intimacy, and the other is this kind of self-justificatory. I'm not wasting my life. I've got some values here. I'm doing it the right way. So I did speak to quite a few Buddhists, and one who was very, very high up, holy person. And it was, and of course with Buddhism, it's all about transcending your own ego, getting past your own ego. And so in some sense, not mattering to yourself, and then get to transcend your own ego and in this way, get past all suffering. But after very long and deep conversations, we spoke about, that is, I have this phrase, a marrying project. That this is our way of getting on with our life. This is the thing we're going to do to reconcile ourselves with being ourselves, feeling like we're not just taking up space here. And he did have a mannering project, and it required a tremendous amount of self-discipline and rigor, meditation. It was a project, and it was to get, past his own ego, and therefore past all suffering. But that was what he was doing, to feel as if he's not wasting his life, as if he's achieving something of purpose, to have some sort of purpose, to have some sort of sense of meaningfulness, to have some sense of coherence about your life. So maybe I still have to, maybe we should we'll talk afterwards, and you can give me the names of some people, or even recommend some books for me to read about this.
But you never included the concept.
I did not include it. Yeah, the closest I came to it, which seemed to me to present a real counterexample, was Buddhism. Yeah. But maybe afterwards, you can write to me and you can tell me who I should talk to, or the books I should read. Yeah.
I don't have anybody in mind. I just thought that their philosophy, general philosophy of giving some sense to life, a greater sense to life.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. But that is in conformity to the Mandarin instinct. So many of the people that it always sounds a way of trying to give some greater sense, one way or the other. So the scientists I talked to, the mathematicians, the philosophers, even, the mothers, I spoke to many mothers who, their Mattering project is to raise flourishing children, who will go on, to raise flourishing children. It's always somehow about a sense of something greater than oneself, except for the competitors. The competitors, it's really about showing you matter more than others. It really is a competitive game. But even there, the competitors are the ones, everybody I spoke to, I felt like I understood, I could imagine my way into their way of living, except for the competitors. That just seemed to me, I said I don't like competition, so I don't really know what it feels like to be a competitor. But often they can do good and great things with their life. One scientist I know, he's a very good scientist. In fact, he has a Nobel Prize. He's a Nobel laureate. And so he's made tremendous contributions to biology. As a matter of fact, he's a Nobel laureate in biology. And somebody else who knows this same scientist said to me about him, he said, you know, he was happy for all of 15 minutes in his entire life. And that was when he got the phone call from Stockholm saying he got the Nobel Prize. And then after 15 minutes, he thought to himself, other people also got that prize, and he was not happy anymore. and that sort of gave me hope. Even a competitor who's really trying to do better than everybody else may do very wonderful things with their. So what is it to do? Like, what are the good? What are the good and the bad ways of? What are the good mattering projects, and what are the bad mattering projects? I think there are 3 criteria. The first criteria is it has to make you feel like your life is worth living, right? It has to satisfy your and it's a life thing. You know, it's not a moment-to-moment happiness thing. It's a sense of what the Greeks called eudaimonia, of flourishing, and so that's the first thing. It ought not to undermine anybody else's sense of mattering, right? Because we all have that sense, and and that's what I would argue makes each of us matter. That we have this sense of it. You can't, undermine other people's sense of mattering. And the third one is if it actually helps in some way to diminish unhappiness, suffering, lack of flourishing, to diminish ugliness, to put in the language of physics, to resist entropy, right? To resist the disorder of entropy. In some way, and that's what life is, resistance to entropy. That is really, you can define life as a resistance to entropy. So if the more our mattering project allies itself with life, rather than entropy, the better it is, and if you think about all the things that we sort of say, that this is better than its opposite, like knowledge is better than ignorance, clarity is better than confusion, flourishing is better than suffering, beauty is better than ugliness. If you think about the thing that is the better than, it's in the direction of water as opposed to disorder. So I've always loved the second law of thermodynamics that actually says that the world is a slide from water to disorder. The whole universe is, all systems are. But what life is we resist it. We take in energy, and what do you do with it? We resist entropy. So what are the bettering mattering projects? Those that resist entropy. That's my evidence.
So you put the line about the dynamic, the physics in the conversation.
Oh,
no, that's
you've
always done it, so it's.
the physics in, yes.
Other questions? Those were very nice, though. Thank you so much. I think today we feel less. It's not so hard to be a human being after this conversation. So thank you. You could have another T-shirt, not only that one that they ordered you.
We should make it easier for one another. It is hard to be human, but we should ease, and not just of humans, but all sentient creatures. If I can get that in, yes.
There are no better words to finish that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.